Hello, this is Kenny at the General Paintball Museum, and today we are going to be maintaining a Spyder Compact 2000 Java Edition. First step is to remove the barrel. This is a Spyder threaded barrel, and set it aside. Then we'll remove the rear pin. To do this, we'll need to remove a clip. I replaced the clip with a keychain so that it's not easily lost. When you remove the clip, you need to keep some pressure on the back because the main spring is pushing out. Then remove the back plate, the spacer, and spring guide. The spacer is just to keep the metal screw from digging into the spring guide. Then the spring, and then remove the cocking knob. Next, we will start sliding the upper and lower bolt out the back, and then it'll drop out the buffer O-ring that goes around the spring. Then the upper and lower bolt will slide out the back. The top one is the upper bolt that touches the paintball, and then the bottom one is the lower hammer or lower bolt that hits the valve. You want to make sure that that notch is very crisp. If it's rounded, it'll cause problems with the sear catching. Then we'll remove the bolt on the bottom right behind the ASA or the vertical air, and then that will expose the valve cup seal. It is also spring loaded, as you can see, and then that'll expose the valve spring, and then the spring guide, which is that metal star, and then the cup seal and valve stem. The valve stem has a little flat spot on it for air to pass by. Then you have the air chamber on the front that can unscrew off, and there's an O-ring there. This is the same as a tank O-ring. Next, we will remove the two screws on the bottom of the body, attaching the trigger frame to the body. These are both the same size as the screw that we removed for the front ASA. Notice the two holes that are offset on the bottom of the grip. They are for a later ASA if you decide to go with the bottom line. With the trigger frame removed, you can now see the sear. You want to make sure that that's a crisp corner also to catch the lower bolt or hammer. Then we have the ball stopper. It is held in with a O-ring, so it is a friction fit, so it would just pull straight out if needed. Next, we have the ball To Tint. It is held in with two Phillips head screws and a plastic plate. This plastic plate is broken in half. Normally it isn't in two pieces, but it is still serving the purpose. And the ball To Tint is just a little rubber nipple there. Now we have the valve. There is a brass common head screw on the bottom. It's covered typically by the trigger frame. You just remove that, and then there's a pin that holds it in place, so it only slides out one direction. And this direction is out towards the front or the barrel end of the gun. And then I usually just take a swab and press, and then it pops out. You can notice where the mark from where the valve was riding on the pin, so that'll go back the same way. One side is different than the other, so when you reassemble, you have to be careful which side goes where. At this point, I just use a swab and I go through the upper and lower tubes and just clean out all the debris. Next up, we have the upper sight rail. It's just held in with one screw in the rear. And now with all that removed, we can wipe down the body and prepare it for reassembly. This sight rail has the wrong screw that is holding it in place. The screw that is in there currently is too long. This causes a problem for reassembly. If you tighten the screw in too far, you'll see the screw inside of the upper tube, so this will not allow the upper bolt to slide in. So if you come across this, you'll need to make sure that that screw is removed or out of the way. The factory screw is not typically in the way. Reinstalling the valve, I just clean it up. It uses tank O-rings, so if you need to replace those O-rings, you can do that with tank O-rings. Then I use a little Ultra Silk boom juice and lube up those O-rings on the valve before reassembling it back into the paintball marker. Again, making sure that you install the valve in the correct direction, otherwise it will leak. Sliding it in until it makes contact with the pin, and then you need to make sure that one of the holes is lined up with the hole on the bottom of the marker where that brass common head screw will go back into. You do not need any sort of sealant or Teflon tape on this brass screw. Just make sure that it is snug. Next, we will install the cup seal. This is the pin and the white cup seal on it, and then I use a little boom juice on this also to lube it up. This helps prolong the life of it. Then the spacer, a star looking thing, and then the valve spring, and then sliding that into the marker and making sure the pin goes all the way through the valve and pokes out the other side, and then pushing the vertical air adapter in and making sure the spring goes inside of it and the pin is all the way through the valve. Otherwise, you'll have too much valve pressure. Then with a little pressure holding on the end, you can reinstall the screw that holds the vertical ASA back in place. This vertical ASA also has 2 O-rings on it, also the same size as a tank O-ring. Then installing the expansion chamber on the vertical ASA. It also has an O-ring and it is a tank O-ring in size. After hand tightening the expansion chamber, we move on to the upper and lower bolts. We'll start with the upper bolt. It has the 2 O-rings, and then those are also the same size as a tank O-ring if you need to replace them. These are in good condition. And then I use a little more boom juice on the raised areas because that's the area that will come in contact with the marker, and then rub that in so it's evenly spread. And then doing the same on the bottom bolt or hammer. We just clean off all the old debris and oil, and then it has an O-ring on it, also the same size as a tank O-ring, and then making sure that bottom edge or lip is crisp so it catches that sear nicely. And then I use a little more boom juice, rub that in evenly, attach the two, and then sliding them into the body together. Reinstall the cocking knob into the side of the lower bolt using a common head screwdriver to make sure it is good and snug so you don't lose it out in the field. And then we put the main spring and then the buffer O-ring that goes back over top of it, the black spacer, and then the spring guide that goes inside the spring. The spring will seat down inside of the lower bolt or the hammer. And then we make sure that we also install the little silver spacer on top of that screw so that the velocity screw does not dig into the plastic spring guide. And then with a little pressure, we put the back plate on and then put the pin in to hold it all together, and then reinstalling the keychain so that the internals are now in place. Now we'll reinstall the trigger frame and using the 2 screws that go into the body, one in the front and one in the rear. We will use an Allen key to tighten these screws down to keep the trigger frame on securely. We don't want to over tighten these screws because the trigger frame is made of plastic and can crack. Now we'll move on to the ball to tint. We will put all these pieces back together. There is a notch typically that will hold the ball to tint on the back side of that plastic piece that is broken there, and then you would be able to set the ball to tint in that notch and then reattach the 2 pieces. In this case, we are just going to set the ball to tint in there and then put the plastic back over it, and then reinstalling the 2 Phillips head screwdrivers. Again, we don't want to over tighten this because it will cause this panel to crack just like this one is. With the ball to tint reinstalled, the last step we have to do is install the barrel. This is again a Spyder threaded barrel, so this is its own unique thread, and then there is typically an O-ring that goes on the barrel that keeps it from loosening up. This one is missing, and then we cock it back and pull the trigger a couple times to make sure that everything's smoothly firing. And I put a little boom juice into the ASA before attaching an air tank and giving it a few test shots. I want to thank everybody for watching, and until next time, thank you.